Good day and welcome everyone to our latest episode of Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. I'm Ethan Foster, your trusted dry-witted commentator on the fascinating mysteries of human health. If you've ever wondered how a single, unassuming molecule could potentially flip the script on everything from persistent infections to chronic pain, you're in exactly the right place.
And I'm Alara Sky, here with my trademark sharp humor, scientific curiosity, and the ever-present instinct to poke fun at Ethan when he least expects it. Today, we're setting our sights on DMSO, an unglamorous acronym that holds some pretty glamorous healing possibilities. Let's just say, DMSO is like the quiet kid in class who suddenly aces every test and gets overlooked until graduation day. We're here to make sure it finally gets its diploma in public awareness.
At first glance, dimethyl sulfoxide doesn't sound like something you'd want to rub on your body or ingest in any form. The name alone might scare you off. But hang in there, folks, because we're about to dig into evidence suggesting DMSO can take on viruses, bacteria, stubborn fungi, parasites, and might even support recovery from injuries that modern medicine struggles to heal.
Yes. So let's unravel the intriguing story behind why DMSO isn't exactly a household name, the surprising breadth of conditions it can address, and how Dr. Mercola's insights are shining new light on this remarkable substance. Just be warned, after today, you might find yourself dropping fun facts about DMSO at cocktail parties, and your friends will have no idea how to respond.
Exactly. Now, as your resident observer, I'll be weaving in the obvious questions. If DMSO is so fantastic, why isn't it in every hospital and pharmacy? Why was it once the darling of certain doctors before falling off the map? And what can we learn from the doctors and researchers who've used it with success for decades?
We'll tackle all that and more in our deep dive. So buckle up. Though in this scenario, we're not traveling via sports car. We're riding a low-profile but powerful wave of data, anecdotes, and comedic commentary that might just reshape how you look at natural health solutions.
Let's get started.
Absolutely. Here we go.
All right, let's set the stage. DMSO, or dimethyl sulfoxide, was once heralded as a wonder substance. At first blush, you might think it belongs in a chemistry lab, or maybe in a storyline from a classic sci-fi novel, but it's actually derived from wood pulp and can be sourced naturally.
Yes. And it's safe when you use it properly. The backstory is that it was looked at for injuries like sprains and burns, as well as for circulatory disorders and joint pain. Over time, researchers found it could also support people dealing with serious infections and autoimmune issues.
You could almost say it suffers from the jack of all trades skepticism. When something claims to do so many things, pain relief, infection control, cell protection, people start raising eyebrows. It's like hearing that your uncle's truck is both a farm vehicle and a Formula One racer. But with DMSO, this broad scope really is grounded in research.
Right. The key is that DMSO has a few superpowers that make it effective in multiple scenarios. It's anti-inflammatory, it boosts circulation, it helps transport certain substances across cell membranes, and it even has direct antimicrobial properties. Put all that in one bottle, and you have a multi-purpose tool that could rival that Swiss Army knife in your back pocket.
So let's walk through why so many people, everyone from athletes to individuals with autoimmune conditions, swear by it. For starters, as we mentioned, it's not just for pain or injuries. The data highlights its ability to tackle infections, specifically the really stubborn kinds.
Yes, chronic bacterial infections, antibiotic-resistant microbes, viruses like herpes and shingles, persistent fungal overgrowth. These are all in DMSO's crosshairs. It's interesting how it can break down bacterial membranes, increase antibiotic effectiveness, and neutralize toxins those bacteria release.
The toxins part is huge. A lot of the damage from infections is actually caused by the toxins pathogens secrete, not just the microbes themselves. DMSO can protect our cells from those toxins. Also, it might even restore antibiotic sensitivity, meaning if you have antibiotic-resistant bacteria, DMSO can sometimes knock down those defenses.
The story about tuberculosis particularly grabbed my attention. TB is still a leading infectious killer worldwide. It has an incredibly resilient cell wall that standard antibiotics struggle to penetrate. But when researchers combined TB drugs with DMSO, they saw improvements in clearing the infection.
Yes, which says a lot about its potential in more complex global health challenges. Let's also consider viruses. Herpes simplex, that annoying culprit behind cold sores and genital herpes, is notoriously persistent. But multiple studies from decades ago showed that when you mix an antiviral drug like idoxuridine with DMSO, the therapy reaches deeper, shortens outbreaks, and reduces pain.
Similarly with shingles, which is caused by the same virus behind chickenpox. Shingles can lead to nerve pain that lasts long after the rash subsides, known as post-herpetic neuralgia. DMSO, again, especially when paired with certain antivirals, gave people significant relief and accelerated their healing.
And let's not forget about fungus. Many folks have fungal infections that are quite tenacious. Think toenail fungus that resists repeated creams or ringworm that just won't quit. Because DMSO enhances skin penetration, it can deliver antifungal agents right where they're needed.
Same logic applies to parasites. If you can't access where the parasite is hiding, you're basically flailing in the dark. DMSO is like that friend who unlocks a closed door so you can go in and tackle the intruder. It has proven helpful with some serious parasitic infections, especially in synergy with antiparasitic medications.
So, we have this molecule that's crossing multiple boundaries and helping in ways standard medication alone can't. Which brings us back to the question, if DMSO is so effective, why is it not mainstream?
Possibly because of regulatory pressures in its early history. Plus, DMSO might not be profitable enough for big companies to champion. They can't patent a natural chemical in the same way they can a novel drug, so it remains in the shadows, overshadowed by more lucrative treatments.
Meanwhile, doctors who have used it consistently report success. Patients who try it with the right guidance often rave about its effects. And, ironically, the more success stories appear, the more it feels like DMSO is part of some hidden corner of medicine that the mainstream glosses over.
But that's where shows like ours come in. We're not here to tell people to chuck all mainstream approaches. We're suggesting a broader perspective, an open-minded approach that includes DMSO as a potential ally against tough health conditions.
Hence the comedic irony. The solution's been right under our nose this whole time. It's like rummaging in your garage for hours to find a special tool, only to discover you already had it in your hand. People in the know about DMSO have been quietly using it for decades.
Let's pivot specifically to how DMSO is used for infections in surgeries or complicated wounds. Surgical teams worry about deep tissue infections that can't be reached by surface treatments. In such cases, doctors have combined antibiotics with DMSO and successfully cleared infections, even in advanced bone infections known as osteomyelitis.
Yes, and there are documented cases of individuals being told they might need an amputation because the infection was out of control. Then they tried applying antifungals or antibiotics dissolved in DMSO, and the limb was saved. That's about as dramatic a success story as you can get.
It feels like a medical version of the underdog sports movie. Nobody believes in the small-town team, but they go on to win the big championship. Except the victory here is a fully intact foot instead of a shiny trophy.
We'll take the foot over a trophy any day. But let's also not ignore the bigger picture. DMSO can deliver oxygenation, reduce inflammation, and protect tissues from further damage. That's critical in speeding up recovery from infections or injuries. Better blood flow plus less inflammation often equals a faster path back to normal.
Then there's the synergy with certain cancer therapies and autoimmune conditions. The research in that realm is more nuanced, but the gist is that some unusual bacteria might be part of what triggers or worsens cancer or autoimmune issues. DMSO's antimicrobial actions might help in that department, which could be why it's shown promise for those patients.
It's a real testament to the holistic approach. Instead of just targeting the tumor or calming immune overreactions, you also consider hidden microbial factors that might be fueling the fire. Meanwhile, DMSO is like the Swiss Army knife that steps in on multiple fronts.
And let's not forget that Dr. Mercola, whose new bestseller focuses on cellular health, has highlighted these overlooked solutions. That's partly why we're dedicating this episode to it. The bestseller is likely filling in knowledge gaps for readers, giving them the backstory on how these forgotten therapies can be game changers.
Yes, it's not every day you see a natural health figure champion a substance that's been overshadowed for so long, but it's exactly the sort of thing Dr. Mercola's known for, shining a light on unorthodox solutions that might just make conventional medicine a little jealous.
Speaking of jealous, can we talk about how pharmaceutical reps must feel about something this effective that they can't easily monetize? Jokes aside, this is why individuals have to be proactive and curious. Sometimes the best solutions aren't sitting in bright neon lights. They're in the research archives, the anecdotal case reports, and the testimony of daring doctors.
I'd love to shift a bit to the day-to-day practicality. How do people typically apply or use DMSO? While we're not here to give step-by-step instructions, it helps to note that it comes in different forms: liquids, gels, creams, and concentrations. The biggest rule of thumb: make sure everything is clean, because it can carry whatever's on your skin straight inside.
Yes, don't apply DMSO on a grimy countertop or a surface covered in questionable substances. You might end up introducing more than you bargained for into your tissues. And if you're worried about a faint garlic odor, that can happen. But in the grand scheme of things, smelling like garlic for a bit might be a small price to pay if it saves a limb or eradicates a chronic infection.
Right, better a brief culinary aroma than a chronic disease. Now, the comedic angle here is imagining your spouse walking in, sniffing the air, and asking why you smell like an Italian restaurant. You get to say, "Because I'm healing, honey. It's DMSO at work."
Exactly. And then they'll politely shuffle out of the room, possibly dropping the line, Just don't forget to serve breadsticks if you're going to smell like that. But let's not overshadow the seriousness. DMSO has been repeatedly validated in clinical settings for everything from shingles to sepsis.
Yes, sepsis is a big one. We know that when the body is overwhelmed by infection, shock can set in, leading to organ failure. If DMSO can mitigate the toxins and support antibiotic function, that's enormous.
Some surgeons also use it prophylactically during operations in areas prone to infection. They might apply it directly onto tissues so antibiotics or other agents can soak in. The main point is that we have a lot of real-world scenarios where DMSO shows major promise.
To me, the comedic punch is that for decades, people have joked about duct tape being the universal fix-it. DMSO is almost like the duct tape of the medical world, multifunctional, cheap, overlooked, and occasionally scorned, because it's too lowbrow for the glitzy mainstream.
I can see the slogan now, DMSO, the duct tape of natural health. But as flippant as that sounds, it does highlight an important truth. Simple solutions can be extremely powerful. We just forget that because we're enamored with the new, the expensive, or the complicated.
So, if you're listening to this and feeling that spark of, wait, how have I never heard of this? Or, why isn't my doctor talking about it? Consider that maybe your doctor simply isn't aware, or was trained at a time when the FDA and other powers frowned on DMSO's popularity.
Also, if you do mention it to your physician, they might be open-minded or they might be dismissive. It depends on their background. But the important takeaway is that the research is there. A lot of it is older, from the 1960s through the 1980s, but it hasn't vanished. We just need to blow the dust off.
That's an ongoing theme in medicine. So many hidden gems from past decades remain overshadowed, even though they had promising data. DMSO is a prime example of that forgotten side of medicine, and maybe that's why Dr. Mercola and others are nudging us to reconsider it.
I suspect that as antibiotic resistance keeps rising, we'll see more doctors turn to synergy, combining standard antibiotics with carriers like DMSO. Because what else do you do when a superbug defies your usual arsenal?
You get creative, or in this case, you get a bottle of DMSO. So, let's paint a picture for the listeners. Suppose you have a serious infection in your foot, you've tried multiple antibiotics, and it's not clearing up. The infection is deep in the tissues. That's when DMSO might step in, ferry those antibiotics directly into the infected area, hamper the bacterial defense mechanisms, and keep toxins from doing more harm.
It's like having an inside man in the bacterial fortress, quietly unlocking doors and disarming guards so the cavalry can charge in. The best part is that it's not hypothetical. We have case reports where people avoided amputations. That's the real magic.
We should also mention the synergy with other therapies. Hyperbaric oxygen, for example, is often used for persistent wounds or certain infections. Combining hyperbaric oxygen with DMSO might yield even more potent results, although I haven't seen as many mainstream discussions about that possibility.
All in good time, Ethan. One step at a time. If the medical community can collectively remember that DMSO exists, we can then move on to these even cooler combinations. In the meantime, let's highlight its use for day-to-day ailments, like a cold sore that you don't want to let ruin your week. DMSO plus a topical antiviral might knock it down faster.
And for the record, many folks also apply it to inflamed joints or muscles post-workout. It's not specifically an infection scenario, but the anti-inflammatory effect can help with soreness. People might joke they smell a bit like garlic bread afterward, but if it means a quicker bounce-back time, they're often fine with it.
And on the topic of mild comedic disclaimers, if you plan on going to a fancy evening event wearing DMSO gel, maybe wait until after your night out. You don't want to sabotage your own entrance by smelling like a gourmet dinner. Or maybe you do, if you love garlic that much.
Now, let's circle back to Dr. Mercola's new bestseller. From what we gather, it's not purely about DMSO. It's about the broader concept of cellular health, how you can support your body's cells to function optimally, ward off disease, and stay resilient in a toxic world. DMSO is one piece of that puzzle.
Yes, the puzzle is massive. It includes diet, lifestyle, stress management, and lesser-known therapeutics like DMSO. The overarching theme is that real health solutions often involve multiple angles, and sometimes those angles include old-school remedies we've forgotten about.
We see that repeatedly in natural health. A therapy gets discovered, shows promise, but the regulatory system or shifting medical fads overshadow it. Then, decades later, a handful of dedicated practitioners resurrect it and say, hey, remember this thing that worked? Maybe we should reintroduce it.
And that's exactly what's happening. The comedic angle is imagining a big scoreboard of modern medicine versus forgotten remedies. The final score? We don't really know yet, but let's hope the synergy approach wins. Because if mainstream medicine and these forgotten remedies join forces, we all benefit.
Hear, hear. So for anyone listening, if you find yourself curious, you can dig into the background of DMSO. Just be prepared to discover that the story spans decades, involves bureaucratic drama, televised exposés, and testimonies from doctors who either got in trouble for using it or soared to small-town stardom.
And though we can't provide a direct library of references on this podcast, the anecdotal and published evidence is out there. If you're academically inclined, you'll find plenty of older studies in scientific journals. They're not front-page news, but they're there, waiting for curious minds to resurrect them.
The comedic scenario in my head is rummaging through dusty library shelves, stumbling on a 1967 article titled, "DMSO Cures Everything But Your Phobia of Public Speaking." Then you blow the dust off, read it, and realize we had solutions hidden away that entire time.
If only it worked for public speaking jitters, but it does wonders for that lingering foot infection. It's a fair trade-off. The moral of the story is that we don't need to reinvent the wheel if we already have a perfectly good one sitting in the research archives.
Precisely. And that's why we can't help but get excited about Dr. Mercola's new bestseller on cellular health, because maybe it'll spark more individuals, and hopefully some practitioners, to take a second look at the potential of DMSO. If that happens, we might see some big changes in how we handle chronic, resistant, or otherwise perplexing infections.
As well as injuries, pain, and all the other conditions that we touched on. Another comedic mental image. DMSO as the Swiss Army knife, heroically brandishing multiple attachments: an antiviral attachment, an antibacterial attachment, an anti-inflammatory attachment, saving the day in a swirl of heroic music. But we're not allowed to mention music cues, so just imagine it quietly.
Indeed, no music cues here, folks, just an invisible orchestra we can't officially acknowledge. But I think our point stands. DMSO is a unique, multifunctional agent that's under the radar, yet profoundly useful.
So, as we draw toward the end, let's recap the main points. DMSO is a safe, naturally occurring substance that can enhance medication delivery, neutralize bacterial toxins, break down microbial defenses, and significantly reduce pain and inflammation. It's been tested on viruses like herpes and shingles, bacteria including TB, fungi, parasites, and beyond.
In surgeries and wound care, it can prevent infections, help heal deep tissue problems, and even reduce the need for amputation in dire cases. It's not a brand new discovery. It's been around, studied, and passionately advocated for by many doctors, yet remains oddly niche.
But with antibiotic resistance on the rise, we might see the medical community revisiting DMSO as an essential ally. And who knows? Maybe in a few years, if you mention DMSO in a doctor's office, they won't look at you like you've stepped off a spaceship. They'll say, "Oh yes, we've been using that with great success."
That's the hope. And I suppose it's what Dr. Mercola and other integrative medicine pioneers are nudging us towards, recognizing that we can't afford to ignore genuinely beneficial therapies, no matter how unglamorous or unprofitable they might be.
Exactly. So thank you all for joining us on this entertaining journey through the hidden wonders of DMSO. Whether you're a casual listener with a lingering curiosity or a health enthusiast always on the lookout for new insights, we hope we've offered a compelling conversation.
I'm Ethan Foster, your reliable narrator of comedic commentary, reminding you that sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones that can truly change lives.
And I'm Alara Sky, always ready with a quick-witted remark, but also a heartfelt excitement for therapies like DMSO that can empower us all. Thanks for listening to Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. We'll catch you next time.
Until then, stay curious and keep exploring those overlooked corners of health.
Take care, everyone.